Viewer and listener discretion is advised. There will be a true crime story ahead with graphic details. Again, viewer and listener discretion is advised. Welcome to my crypt. Please, since you've stumbled in, why not take a seat and keep me company while I work on my WIP, and I will regale you with a story. Welcome, my friends. This is Tales from the Cr'wip't. Today we are going to talk about some true crime. This is going to be a story about, well, I'm going to have to let you decide. Is this a tale of love, or is this a tale of psychopathy? Do we have an innocent, naive situation, or do we have a psychopath? It's debatable. I'll tell you the facts of the story and let you decide for yourself where you think the story lies. Today we're going to talk about the tragic fate of the Caffey family. Please allow me to introduce you to the Caffeys. Caffeys are a small family from a small town in Alma, Texas. Penny Caffey's mother, who plays piano at the local church. Father, Terry Caffey, is a layman priest or pastor at the local church. The oldest child of Penny and Terry is Erin Caffey, 16 at the time of this story, who is, by all accounts, a phenomenal vocalist, often performing as a soloist and in the choir at the local church. The second oldest child was 13-year-old Matthew, who liked to play the harmonica, and the youngest son, Tyler, age 8, who liked to play the guitar. They're a nice-looking family, aren't they? Well, what if I were to tell you that by the end of this story, of this beautiful family of 5, only 2 will remain. One of them will be touted as a survivor, and the other will be known as a convicted murderer, sentenced to 2 life sentences with a minimum of 40 years to be served before parole is even a consideration. Yes, it's true. Take a good look at that family, because sadly, 3 of them have perished. And here's their story. The Caffey story really started essentially with their move from a bigger city in Texas to small little Alma, Texas. Population less than 1,000 at the time of this story, more around the 500 neighborhood. And the reason why the Caffeys moved out to this small rural town was to provide their family with a little more sense of safety, to get away from some of the dangers of the bigger cities and towns. So this family, all-American, God-fearing, country-loving, hard-working family. So what happened to this family? What could have possibly gone wrong? In November of 2007, the Caffeys had been homeschooling their children for a period of time, I believe approximately 2 years, because when they first moved to Alma, they did enroll their children in public school. But Erin, the daughter, had had some trouble as she aged and hit puberty and started developing. She was getting attention, unwanted attention in most cases, according to her, such that she was no longer safe or comfortable at school. She was described as slender, small-framed, long, beautiful blonde hair, blue eyes, a brilliant smile, a pleasant face, and a bubbly personality. Her friends would say that she was a bit naive and very sheltered. As she started to grow out of that awkward kid stage and into arguably an even awkwarder puberty stage and started growing into herself, she started getting attention from the other kids at school. And what really was the tipping point for her being removed from public school was an encounter where she went to the girls' restroom to use the facilities and was cornered and approached by a fellow female student who then advanced upon her in an aggressive manner and kissed her in the bathroom, unsolicited, according to Erin. When the McCaffeys found out about this and how upset it made Erin, they decided to pull Erin and her two brothers out of public school and teach them education at home. So for the next couple years after that incident, the McCaffey children were homeschooled. It was in the fall of 2007 that the boys, Matthew and Tyler, had kind of had enough of homeschooling and convinced their parents that they could handle public school and that they should be able to go to public school, and they needed public school. They needed to socialize outside of their own home and church. The Caffeys discussed it, and they agreed that the boys could return to school. But Erin needed to stay home for her safety. They weren't quite sure she was ready to go back to public school yet. After a short time of the boys being back in public school, Erin too desired to go back to public school and reintegrate into society, really. So she made the same plea and argument to her parents about why she should be allowed to return back to public school. And after much consideration and discussion and debate, the McCaffey parents agreed. Erin, it is time. You can go back to public school. So the McCaffeys decided, with Erin going back to school and being 16 at this time, that maybe it was also time she had her own vehicle. And they also allowed Erin to get a job at a local fast food restaurant called Sonic. For those of you who are not familiar with a Sonic is a fast food burger chain, and I'm not sure that all the locations do this anymore, but they used to have a 50s burger and shake kind of vibe where the servers would come out on roller skates, take your order, skate back into the restaurant, and when your food was ready, they would skate your tray of food out to you and you would eat in the car. And then when you were done, you would pay and tip and be on your way. This particular Sonic did still participate in the roller skating server service, and Erin was hired as their newest car hop server. Now, as I mentioned, Erin was developing into a young woman and garnering lots of attention. Reports say that her coworkers had stated, when asked about Erin, that Erin was the most popular server there. She was frequently requested, and customers would come specifically to be served by her, and she particularly got a lot of attention from the male crowd. It was fun for her to be at this job. It was a way for her to meet people and to integrate back into society, along with going back to school, because being homeschooled and having been in school and then pulled out and then put back in, she kind of didn't integrate very smoothly back into the social scene, as it were. She was a little reserved, a little awkward, a little uncomfortable, and was having trouble really adjusting. So the job was really helpful to her. It gave her a sense of independence and confidence, and of course the money. And apparently, according to some at the Sonic, she made so much money from tips, and a large part of that is attributed to her looks, in the opinion of her coworkers. But this, my friends, is where she meets a boy. So Erin not only got to go back to school as she wished, her parents had bought her a vehicle, and she got a job, and now we have a new boyfriend. Meet Charlie. Charlie is 19 years old and a student at the same school that Erin attends. However, they hadn't met each other before because Charlie had been out of town working with, I believe, with his aunt, if I understood correctly, and he had just come back into town to start the fall school year and had not yet had the occasion to run into Erin until that day he stopped at Sonic. If you ask him, he would tell you it's pretty much love at first sight, and that's what his friends would say too. He took one look at Erin and knew that that was his girl. He requested Erin as his server, and she accommodated. They struck up a conversation, and after a few visits to see her at the Sonic, he gathered up the courage to ask her out on a date, and she accepted. A little more about Charlie. He was destined to join the Army upon graduation. He had gone to a ROTC, if I recall correctly, the military preparatory program situation, and he joined the National Guard. And as soon as he finished his last year of school, his senior year, that year he was going to go off to the armed forces and serve his country. And those were his plans. And Erin knew about it and was good with it, was proud of him. His family was proud of him. He was said to kind of have a short temper, according to his friends, but if you asked his family, he was a quiet, good boy who didn't have a bad bone in his body per se, and was really gonna go places, was really gonna do something with his life. He was well-mannered, he was good, he wanted to do right. Well, anyway, Erin and Charlie began a fall romance. Their relationship grew quite quickly. Over the course of the next several months, they spent all their free time together. However, while they were allowed to date, the Caffeys insisted that if they were going to date, because Charlie was 19 and their daughter Erin was 16, they felt it only appropriate that their dates be conducted in the Caffey home where they could be supervised. The young couple agreed, and the rules were that all dates were to occur in that Caffey home. Charlie had to be gone by 9, however, could speak to Erin or communicate with her on the phone until 10 o'clock. But after that, lights out, communication done, and that was the end of their day. And the couple happily agreed to these terms. For a while, everything seemed pretty okay, but the Caffey parents, Terry and Penny, they weren't the biggest fans of Charlie. They kind of just got a vibe from Charlie. Terry would say that he couldn't really put his finger on what they didn't like. Maybe it was the confidence that he had. He walked in confident on their first meeting. He kind of had a machismo about him. He just didn't seem as respectful as they had hoped he would when addressing them. Just something they didn't really like, but they couldn't really point at any one thing and say, I don't like him because of this. It was just a vibe. But they figured, Erin will pick up on it eventually. She's a smart girl. We've raised her well. And this relationship, they're kind of not for each other, and it won't last long. And they had honestly hoped it would fizzle out on its own, especially being young love. Sometimes those relationships don't really last that long, and that's kind of what they were hoping for. She would be busy with school, church, and work, and Charlie would quickly kind of just fade away. But unfortunately for the Caffey parents, Erin and Charlie were smitten, and they continued to develop their relationship over the next couple months. They would meet at church, and they were often caught sneaking away when they thought no one was looking, and then caught in a compromising position, if you will, being very public with their displays of affection, and that affection they were displaying was quite often not appropriate for church, was not appropriate for their age, and made a lot of people, including the Caffeys, very uncomfortable. They quite frequently were just, like young kids will do, they were making out a lot. Well, let's just put it out there. They were heavily making out a lot, including, like I said, at church when they thought no one was looking, at school between classes. Anytime really they could get alone time, they were smooching. And that did not help the Caffeys, except Charlie, especially considering they didn't really like him a whole lot in the first place. But as much as they got in trouble, little Charlie and Erin, they persisted with their relationship. Eventually, the Caffeys started noticing changes in Erin. Erin started becoming less interested in her church work and, church involvement. She was less interested in doing her solos, participating in the choir. All she ever wanted to do, everything was Charlie, Charlie, Charlie. And they tried to be understanding about it because young love, but it started to change her personality a little bit too. She was starting a rebellious kind of phase. She was acting out of character for herself. She was pushing the rules to the limits. And the Caffeys were afraid that if they tried to push her away from Charlie, that, the more they pushed away, tried to push them away, the closer to him she would get. So they were just trying to tough it out and let the whole thing play out and come to a natural conclusion. And as such, when the young couple came to the Caffeys and said, could we maybe go on dates outside of the house sometime to a restaurant, the Caffeys begrudgingly agreed, and they did let the young couple go out a couple times a month on their own, on the condition that Charlie would bring Erin back by 9 p.m. and no later. And the same rule applied. They could talk until 10, and then that was it for the night. And the couple did follow these rules, and everything seemed to be going fairly well and smooth. One day in February, the Caffey family was dealt a devastating personal blow. Terry's father had passed away, Erin's grandfather, and Terry took that passing very hard. It was later that same week that it had been brought to Terry's attention that Charlie had a MySpace account with some pretty questionable posts and pictures on it. MySpace? What's that, you ask? Well, if you don't remember MySpace or you've never heard of it before, MySpace, you can kind of think of it like a precursor to Facebook, but lots cheesier. MySpace was like Facebook. You had your own page, and you could set background music, you could put photos, you could put posts, and just kind of share little bits of yourself with the world, and the world could interact back with you if they wanted. It was more like kind of Facebook, but forum posts almost, instead of comments and chat rooms. Just know that it was like a primitive version of Facebook, okay? So Terry took a look at Charlie's MySpace account and discovered what he had feared and Penny had feared. Charlie wasn't really all he was cracked up to be, and he wasn't really this nice young man that he put himself out to the Caffeys to be. Charlie, he'd been naughty. He posted some pictures and some posts about doing drugs and hanging out with the wrong people, doing the wrong kinds of things. But the most disturbing was that he was very openly posting pictures and written word about his promiscuity, both with Erin and with other women from town. Upon seeing this and learning that his daughter was dating a young man and had evolved into a sexual relationship in which was being posted very publicly by Charlie, and that Charlie was not being faithful to his daughter, Terry informed Penny, and together they decided it was time to have a talk with Erin. Charlie needed to go. So Terry and Penny were waiting for Erin when she came home. And when she came home, Penny noticed that Erin was wearing a ring on her wedding ring finger. Yes, apparently she had obtained a ring from Charlie a few days prior and had kept it hidden from her parents, but on this occasion forgot to take it off before she came in the house. And this ring, if you ask Erin, was an engagement ring. Charlie had proposed to her. But others that knew the young couple said that it was just a promise ring and that Charlie had given it to her with the intent of promising that when they were a little older and they were done with school and ready to start adult life together, that he wanted to marry her and that he was faithful to her. And so, according to Erin, the young couple at this point was engaged. Penny was not happy about this, neither was Terry, and as they sat down to discuss Charlie and the relationship between Erin and Charlie and the fact that they wanted Erin to break up with Charlie and were divulging what they had found about his MySpace account and such, they were met with some resistance at first. Erin showed them the ring and said, "But he loves me. He's proposed to me. We love each other and we're going to get married. So what, I don't know what your problem is, but this is kind of what we're doing." And as they continued to talk, they divulged the MySpace information to her and showed her proof. He's cheating on you and he's telling, your private business to everyone. This is not how a young woman conducts herself. This is not how someone in our family conducts themselves. We want you to break up with him. Erin took a moment, and Terry and Penny were pretty surprised by her next response, which was unusually calm for the situation. They were kind of expecting some more pushback, maybe some argument, but Erin was very calm and matter of fact, and she told her parents, "Thank you. I actually had been considering breaking it off with him for quite some time now. I just was wrapped up in the relationship, and I didn't know how to do it, but this is the way I can. I will just tell him that you guys want me and him to break up, and now I know how I can break up with him. Thank you." And Terry and Penny, as shocked as they were, accepted it and were grateful that their daughter could see that this wasn't the boy for her after all. And Erin agreed to end the relationship the next day. 2 days later, in the early morning hours, a car starts to pull up the long driveway to the Caffey's country home. They didn't make it far up the driveway before the Caffey family dog, a large black lab, who had been accidentally left out for the night, started raising a ruckus and started barking and such and scared the car off. The car left. A little while later, approximately an hour or so, the car returned. The dog was no longer barking in the yard to scare it off, and it parked at the end of the driveway and waited. What was the car waiting for? The car was waiting for Erin. Erin came running out of the house in the middle of the night, in the darkness, in her pajamas, ran out to the car and hopped in, where she was greeted by her boyfriend Charlie, his friend 20-year-old Charles, and Charles's girlfriend Bonnie, also age 18, I believe. So there were Charlie, Charles, Bonnie, and Erin in the car, and they drove around for a while. Meanwhile, while this is happening, the Caffeys were asleep in their beds, the rest of the family anyway. Terry and his wife Penny sleeping together in their room downstairs. Erin's younger brothers, Matthew and Tyler, asleep in their beds on the second floor. And Erin, as you know, joyriding with her boyfriend and his friends. A couple hours later, Terry was startled awake by his bedroom door swinging open. A quick glance at the clock revealed that it was about 2 a.m. and then all he could remember were bits and pieces after that. Shots rang out throughout the room. A gun. He saw in the flashes there were 2 assailants, 2 males. They were shooting him and his wife as they startled awake from sleep in their bed. The gun jammed after a few shots, at which point one of the assailants whipped out a samurai-like sword and stabbed Penny. And while that was occurring, the other assailant fixed the gun and handed it back to the original shooting assailant, at which time that assailant continued shooting at Terry and Penny. Terry was shot in the face, the head, the back, and the back of the leg. I believe they estimated there were 7 total gunshots to Terry. Penny had been fatally shot in her bed and I believe had 3 to 5 bullet wounds and was all but decapitated from the stabbing, slashing of the samurai sword when the gun jammed. After the assailants were pretty confident that the Caffey parents had been disposed of, they proceeded upstairs to where Erin, Matthew, and Tyler's rooms were located. And they went room by room searching for the Caffey children. They first found Matthew Caffey in his room, bewildered, confused. Matthew's last words were, "Charlie, why? Charlie, please stop. Charlie, why are you doing this? Don't do this, Charlie." And at that point, one of the assailants, Charlie, yes, Erin's Charlie, felt that he could not complete what the assailant's mission was, what he had started, with Mr. and Mrs. Caffey. He was okay with what they had done to the parents, but he could not harm the children. So he asked his cohort to dispose of the children because he just could not. His cohort did not have a problem ending the lives of the children, and shot, then stabbed Matthew in his bed. Then the two boys went to look for the last remaining Caffey member that was in the house, because remember, Erin had left earlier and hopped in the car with her boyfriend Charlie and his two friends. So she wasn't home. And they then went looking for 8-year-old Tyler, who in the fray, out of fear, seeking help, shelter, protection, had run into his big sister Erin's room, and upon finding her not there, got scared and hid in her closet. Charlie and his cohort found little Tyler cowering in the closet, where they then took turns stabbing him with the samurai sword until he perished as well. Upon facilitating the annihilation of the family, the two men, Charlie and as of this moment, unknown assailant number 2, then rifled through Erin's room, where they found a bag that was already packed full of Erin's things as if she were going to run away. Some clothing, some important stuff, pictures, money. And then the assailants went back downstairs and found the family's lockbox safe and entered a code, opening it and collecting the over $2,000 that was inside. They then located Erin's purse and took the money, about I think it was something weird like $483 or something that was in there, and took that. And as they were collecting these things and preparing to exit the house, they then took Bic lighters. Each one of them had Bic lighters in their pockets. They removed those from their pockets and started flicking them and just lighting things on fire as they walked through the house. They were lighting curtains on fire, tablecloth, furniture, anything flammable. They were lighting it on fire. And before too long, the house began to go up in flames, and by the time Charlie and his fellow assailant left the home, it was ablaze from ground floor up, burning quite violently. Ran out down the driveway to the vehicle, hopped in, and were greeted by Bonnie, remember, Charles' girlfriend, and Erin, who had been waiting in the car while Charlie and, you guessed it, Charles, his friend, had been in the house facilitating the murders of Erin's family. They then drove away, and according to Charlie, Charles, and Bonnie, Erin, as they pulled away, took a look at her house ablaze, knowing what had occurred in that house and seeing her family home go up in flames with her family inside. And she said, that was effing cool. And then she was described by the people in the vehicle as being, quote, as happy as a kid at Christmas. She also allegedly exclaimed, I'm free, I'm finally free. That was so cool. End quote. Well, what happened then? The kids drove away, and we'll come back to them shortly. Meanwhile, while the boys were looting the house after they had viciously attacked and killed Penny, Erin's mom, Matthew, Erin's oldest younger brother, and Tyler, Erin's youngest little brother, they thought they had gotten everyone. But Terry was still alive. Terry had lost consciousness, and when he came to, he realized that the house was on fire and that he needed to get out. He was unsure of the fate of the rest of his family in that moment. He did remember kind of coming in and out of consciousness as the attacks were occurring, and he could remember hearing his son Matthew plead with Charlie, calling him by name and begging him not to hurt him and asking him why. But he didn't really know what the fate of his children were. He couldn't believe that the Charlie that ate dinner with them every week and was dating his daughter and was always around, that Charlie was capable of hurting the children. He had racing thoughts of why this would have happened and figured that it was likely a revenge thing against him and Penny for causing Erin, forcing her really to break up with him, and didn't think that the children would be involved, and had hopes that Charlie and the other unknown to Terry assailant had maybe just left the children alone. But one thing was for certain. He was shot multiple times. He was struggling to hold on to consciousness, and he said in multiple interviews that all he could think is, I need to stay alive and I need to get help for my family. I need to stay alive and I need to get help for my family. As he struggled to try to get up, he found that he was grievously injured and could not stand, could not pull his body up off the floor. And the house is burning down. There's smoke everywhere. So he starts kind of pole crawling the best that he can. He gets himself kind of up on the bed a little bit to where he can see his wife Penny. Is she okay? Is she there? Can she be helped? And he said it took him only a glance to realize that his wife Penny was deceased. It was not hard to tell due to the nature of the sword wound to her neck. And he knew in that moment that this was real bad. This was real bad. So he mustered all the strength that he could, knowing that his wife couldn't be saved, but maybe his children could. He knew he couldn't get up the stairs. He knew the house was on fire, so he did the next best thing that he could do. He started crawling. He crawled about 300 yards to a neighbor's home for help. That crawl was through a little wooded area with a creek, and they estimate he took about 2 hours with 11 bullet wounds, unable to walk, unable to really yell, and trying to stay conscious. He managed to traverse the 300 yards to the closest neighbor's house, where he was able to get their attention, wake them up somehow. I didn't find details on how, with his inability to even sit up or get up, and is grievously injured as he was. But again, he did make the 2-hour 300-yard crawl to the neighbor's house, where he got their attention. They called 911. Paramedics arrive, and fearing that he was not going to survive his injuries, and knowing that this might be his only attempt to identify the perpetrator of this crime against him and his family, the only thing he could say to responders was, "Charlie. Charlie. Charlie. It was Charlie." And then he lost consciousness. Terry woke up a couple days later in the hospital, and when he came around, found that he had had surgeries performed and that he was stable and he was going to survive. However, the police had to inform him of a few things. The first thing they informed him of was they confirmed his worst fear. Well, one fear anyway, he already knew. Penny had deceased. And then they had to inform him that also deceased were his sons, Matthew and Tyler. They then had to explain to Terry when he asked, "What about my daughter? I have a daughter, Erin." The police informed him that unfortunately, Erin had been arrested earlier that very day under suspicion of murder. Terry's reaction was confused at first, and then the police further explained, "We're sorry to tell you, but it seems at this point that your daughter Erin was the mastermind and planner of the murder of your family." So, yeah, Terry was told that his one surviving child, Erin, was actually the one that had plotted to have the entire family, including him, murdered. They also informed him that the other assailants were caught, and those assailants were Charlie, Erin's boyfriend, as Terry had suspected by his son's last words, and Charlie's friend Charles, and Charles's girlfriend Bonnie. All 4 youths had been arrested and charged with the murder and attempted murder of the Caffey family. So we last saw Erin hopping in a car, driving away after the commission of the assault. But what about the first time when she, the dog barked and the car drove away. Was that Charlie and his friends? Yes. The initial attempt was supposed to be that attempt, but nobody anticipated the family dog to be out, and they were afraid that the barking dog had alerted the Caffeys and took off. They got spooked. Investigation, phone records, interrogations later showed that it was Erin who lured the dog back into the house and subdued the dog, and then for approximately an hour had repeatedly called and called and called Charlie, pleading, come back, please come back, you've got to come back, I've got the dog under control, come back, and ended up convincing Charlie to return. And upon his return, she ran out to the car in her pajamas, hopped in the car with them, and according to Charlie, Charles, and Bonnie, they then drove around for a short time, finally coming to a parking area at a local cemetery, where they sat for the rest of the hour and planned the murder of the Caffey family, including, Erin's input. Erin was the one kind of arguing with them. The kids would say that all three of the other kids, excluding Erin, so, Bonnie, Charlie, and Charles, all told the same story, even interrogated separately, all had the same story. That early on in the relationship with Charlie, as soon as kind of he got hooked by her and fell pretty hard and fast for her, she started in with stories of kind of mistreatment, and also was starting to tell him, my parents don't really like you, they don't like us dating, they don't want us to be together. Now when my mom saw the ring, she hit me. Whether those things happened or not, no one's really sure. Everyone has a story. Terry will say no, there was never any physical abuse. There were never any reports of physical. There's no evidence that ever occurred. However, the only two people that would know for sure is Erin, who's making that claim, and her mother, who is deceased. So, there, who knows? Could be. But there had never been any domestic violence reports, suspicions, anything of that nature whatsoever. Everyone said they were a perfect church-going, God-loving, God-fearing American family. Stereotypical. Everything was great. There were no signs of anything like that. The only thing that maybe anyone could stretch to be a negative about the family was how strict the Caffeys had been with regards to raising their children, pulling them out of public school at the first sign of trouble. The dating had to be done in the house. But again, is it really that bad? Was that really bad enough to be murdered? Anyway, so the kids had, according to Charlie, Charles, and Bonnie, they all four with Erin were parked, and they tried to convince Erin, no, there are other ways. Let's don't do this. Let's run away. You already have a bag packed. You already know where the money is in the lockbox safe situation. Why not just take it and run? Let's go. Erin refused. She was convinced them that the only way to truly get free from her parents' control was if they were dead. And further, she said, if my parents are dead, I don't want my brothers to go into foster care, so you might as well kill them as well. I don't want them to suffer through the system. And when initially the kids had been like, no, we're not going to kill any kids, she also said, but they annoy me. Allegedly, those were her words and her reasonings for needing not just her parents removed from the equation, but also her younger brothers, 13 and 8. The reason why she wanted them gone was because they were annoying her and because she didn't want them to have a life in the system with her parents dead. Yeah, guys. Whew. Okay. The kids spent the better part of an hour trying to convince Erin that there were other ways. There was marriage, there was pregnancy, there was running away, there was anything but killing her parents. But she was emphatic, according to them, that that was the one and only way that she could ever be free to love Charlie and that they could ever be together, and that she truly wanted this. And so Charlie, for the sake of his love and the girl that he was infatuated with, agreed. And Charles, his friend, agreed as well for a price. The money that the boys took out of that safe, the about $2,000, that was Charles's payment promised to him by Erin for assisting in the facilitation of the murder of her parents and her siblings, and then helping them escape after, and keeping quiet about it, of course. And you know, funny enough, not funny like haha, but funny like ridiculous, Charles was questioned, you know, about this money and payment, and he stated in his interrogation that he was really swayed, you know, what really swayed him was the money, and he was going to use that money to pay an attorney to help him fight for custody of his child. Let that sink in for a second. This 20-year-old young man agreed to murder a mother, a father, and 2 young children for $2,000 that he was then going to turn around and use to try to hire an attorney in order to get custody of his child. Okay. Well, thank goodness they caught him before he could do that. I'm gonna go on a limb and say he never got custody of that kid. I mean, what was he thinking? Scary that a young man like that, who thinks like that and who does these things and somehow rationalized the killing of 2 adults and 2 young children for $2,000 and then thought that somehow he was fit to be a parent is beyond me. And to have custody of his child. What? Okay. Cool story, bro. So that was Charles. That's how he got roped into this. And Bonnie claimed that she didn't know anything about this plan until after, when they were in the cemetery and talking about it, was the first she had heard of this. But the reason why she was even there at all is because she was attached to the hip to her boo, Charles, and he didn't get to go anywhere without her. And if he was going to go in and get into some stuff, she was going to be by his side. And so that's the only real reason she was there, is because she insisted, nope, if you're going to go out tonight, I'm going with you. You know, you don't go anywhere without me. I'm attached. So she claims this was the first she had heard of a murder plot, and she didn't know anything about it until they all were together discussing it beforehand in the graveyard. And she wasn't going to abandon Charles, even though she knew at that point what he was going to go in the house to do. She had hoped maybe that they would chicken out, or that they would say they did it but wouldn't really do it. She claims that she didn't really think they would actually go through with it. And Charlie, he did, like I said, he did it for his love. He did it because he loved Erin, and this is what she truly wanted and needed. He did say, though, that when it came to the young boys, he could not cross that line. He had to have Charles do that for him. And then they said that the bags that they got from Erin's room and the money from her purse, Erin had told them where all of that was. She had pre-prepared that for them to grab as they did and bring out with them as they did. And that was her go bag and her go funds. That was her escaping go bag and money for her and Charlie to then run away and escape together. And her idea about burning the house down, she thought that it would be assumed that she perished in the fire as well, and that they would be able to make a clean getaway. She hadn't counted on her father surviving, or anyone really, and certainly hadn't counted on the police getting all this information and figuring it out so fast and finding them all so fast. But that is like everything they discussed, the plan, as it were, that Erin had devised at the cemetery. But the kids say that she had mentioned it often. They talked about it quite frequently, and even during the investigation and on, like, in court, I guess, an ex-boyfriend of Erin's from before Charlie had said that she initially seduced him and had asked him to murder her parents. Whether we believe that or not, I mean, who's to say what private conversations happen? But he claims, this boy, I believe his name was maybe Michael, but this previous boyfriend, the one right before Charlie, he claims that she threw on seductress mode and had him wrapped around her little finger. And once she kind of had him in her grasps and kind of had him lovesick, she started talking about her parents, and she couldn't be free with them alive, and trying to convince him to kill them for her so that she could be free to be with him. Sound familiar? Yeah. Now, Erin's version of what happened. So we know that's the version of kind of events that the three other teens gave. You know, Charlie, Charles, and Bonnie. But what about Erin? What did Erin have to say? Well, first let's talk about how Erin was caught. Okay? What happened when they all got in the car and they're driving away? Erin's exclaiming, "Oh, I'm finally effing free. That was effing cool," and all that stuff. And the house is burning down in the rearview mirror. What happened then? Because that will tell us a little bit about Erin's story. So what we know is that the kids then drove away. They thought it was best that they split up. Charlie's friend, took his $2,000 and I guess, I don't recall, to be honest, you guys. I think, like, went home. Bonnie dropped Charlie and Erin off at Charles's brother's abandoned trailer. You follow me here? Charles had a brother, the accomplice had a brother who had a trailer that was abandoned, and they kind of used it as like a spot to go do the sex and do the drugs and do all the things, parties and things they weren't supposed to be doing. That was where they went. It was kind of like a squatter's hideout, and it was littered and cluttered and dirty and trashy, like a squatter's hideout you can imagine would be. Lots of trash, lots of piles of clothes, dirty mattresses, stuff and things. That's where Bonnie dropped off Erin and Charlie after the crime occurred. According to Charlie, once they were dropped off at this trailer and they were alone, he and Erin had sex to celebrate her freedom. Her house is burning down. Her little brothers have been brutally murdered. Her mother's been brutally murdered. And for all she knows, her father has been brutally murdered. And this girl's got her pants around her ankles. Yeah. And then after that, they, I guess, fell asleep, because then what I recall from the information is police, after being informed by Terry on, as a declaration while he thought he was dying, in the paramedics' care, that it was Charlie who had done this. They had somehow tracked down Bonnie and Charles, who informed him then where Charlie and Erin were, and the police went to the trailer to arrest Charlie. And upon searching the trailer, the police officer was moving trash bags around and clothes around, and when he moved one big bag of trash and scooped some clothes away, he saw what he thought was a blonde wig, and he grabbed it to pull it away, and he yanked it, and it ended up being Erin's hair, attached to Erin's head, attached to Erin's body, where she was hiding under this pile of trash. I think essentially Charlie had just chucked a bunch of stuff on top of her, and they were digging through the pile of stuff looking for evidence or looking for her, and ended up pulling her hair. And when she was discovered, she looked like she had just been woken up. She looked groggy and confused, and the officers at the time, they didn't really know what Erin's role was, and they were treating her as maybe a victim, since the rest of her family had been annihilated, and they hadn't really gotten any information or facts yet from the kids they were apprehending for the crime. So when they found her and she appeared to be groggy, they asked her who she was, and she said who she was. Her ID and her bag were nearby for them to confirm. And they asked her what happened, and all she could say was, "Fire. Fire." They went ahead and took her to the police station, wrapped her up in a blanket, told her she was safe, kept her separate from everyone else, and then had some investigators come in, female investigators, and were talking to her and asking her, "What happened, honey? Tell us everything." And Erin claimed that she had been in the house and woke up to the house being on fire, smoke everywhere, couldn't breathe, couldn't see, and then 2 masked assailants burst into her room and forced her out of bed and onto the ground face down. They hit her a couple times, and then they stuck something in her and drugged her, and she was in and out of consciousness as they drug her through the burning house, and she remembers nothing after that. When they asked her where, if she knew where she had been found, she had no idea. Where was I? And where's my boyfriend? Where's Charlie? So yeah, that was her initial story, is she had been knocked out with drugs and drugged through the burning house and kidnapped and kept as a hostage at this trailer and literally had no recollection of anything that had happened from that time at her burning house to the time that the officer yanked her hair while searching the pile of rubble for evidence or people, and nothing in between. Nothing. But then, you know how these things go. As the investigators were interrogating the other 3 that were involved in getting their story, they came back and confronted Erin and told her, we don't believe you. They ran drug panel screen things, found out there were no drugs of any kind in her system at all, and investigators noticed that her clothes were very clean for being drugged through a burning, smoky house, and they also did not smell like smoke at all. No soot, no smell of smoke, no evidence that she had been anywhere near a burning house or fire. So pretty quickly they debunked her initial story, and after that she claimed, still kind of claiming victim in that Charlie has a really bad temper. Charlie can be pretty aggressive. Charlie's been talking about wanting to kill my parents. He called it Plan FUBAR. And FUBAR, they asked her, well, what does FUBAR mean to you? And she's like, FUBAR is the name of what Charlie calls the plan to kill my parents. It's all him. So that has been her story. To my knowledge, that was her story all the way through, and maybe even currently today. I did see some interviews. It was about 5-6 years after the events of that night. She did do a bunch of interviews with Pierce Morgan, and Dr. Phil were interviewing her from her new home in the state penitentiary, where she is going to be living for a very long time, because she ended up taking a plea deal, pled guilty, and her sentence was 2 life sentences to be served consecutively without the possibility of parole until at least 40 years of her sentence had been served. So she will be approximately 59 years old before she even has the chance at parole. And the other 3 were convicted and found guilty as well, the boys serving life sentences. They're gone. They're not coming out. And Bonnie had, I think, a 40-year sentence. She had a lesser sentence, but she's in jail too. And all of them, donezo, gone to jail. And like I said, to this day, Erin still maintains her innocence and that she is kind of a victim, if not a victim of being kidnapped and coerced or whatever, a victim of not doing anything to stop her parents or stop her boyfriend from hurting her parents, not believing that he would really follow through with it. But there's that on that. Why would you plead guilty and take a plea deal if it's because her attorneys had probably advised her that there is enough evidence to nail you? If you don't take this plea deal, you will never see the light of day. At least this way, you take the plea deal, plead guilty, you'll have a chance to see daylight again. And she took it. That's my guess. As for Terry, her father, he went through a severe depression after all of this. However, the one thing that he had remained steadfast true, and I don't know if it holds today, but I know that he got a lot of flack and heat because even after the police told him, your daughter is the mastermind, the planner, the one who orchestrated this all, she, all the evidence points to it. There's confessions from the other participants, everybody, it all points at Erin. And her father refuses to believe anything that does not conform to Erin's story. He believes Erin. He believes that while, she was not the planner of this and she was just poor, naive Erin, fell in with the wrong people, got manipulated into going along with this, and it was all the other kids' ideas. But regardless, being a man of faith, he has forgiven everyone. He has forgiven Erin for any part that she played, whether he what he believes to be true or otherwise. He forgives Charlie and Charles and Bonnie, but struggled to get there, but in the end has forgiven everyone for murdering his family, including his daughter who planned it all. And he stuck by her side, got a lot of flack and support. Being a man of faith, being a layman pastor, he did get a lot of support from the faith-based community because he kind of used the tenement of forgiveness in his faith as his reasoning for the forgiveness aspect and as a shining example and proof of faith. And that got a lot of support from his faith-based community. But on the flip side of that, he did get a lot of heat and flack for being in denial, refusing to accept the facts, refusing to believe the evidence and the facts. He was also interviewed by like Piers Morgan and Dr. Phil and many other psychologists, body language psychiatrists have done little excerpts and shows about Erin and her father Terry and read their language, read their psychology, and the general consensus across the board is that Terry is in denial so severe that he's like mentally broken in terms of like his mind won't allow him to hold her responsible, and also that Erin is a very manipulative, masterful psychopath, and she has her dad in her claws. She has manipulated him beyond, help, essentially, to the point where he's even willing to overlook the fact that she orchestrated the murder of her family and his attempted murder. But I implore you guys, check the description box down below for my resources and look up the case. Erin Caffey, she's considered one of the most dangerous psychopathic female, young female killers in the country. It's just kind of cray-cray. How it all turned out and ended up. And to kind of wrap it up with Terry, he stayed by her side from before he even left the hospital. He ended up, upon being released from the hospital, he would visit her at the correctional center every day for a while, then it was every week for a long time, then once a month, and kind of drifted off. Now, whether he still visits her to this day or not, I'm not sure, but I know that it was at least a monthly thing for about 5 or 6 years in. And, he has preached about faith and forgiveness and written books and does public speaking, and it's all based on his experience with his daughter and what happened to his family and all forgiveness and all of that. He did remarry about 7 months after the tragedy, but I think that was part of mental instability and kind of a rebound of a depression thing, because that marriage did not last very long at all, and pretty much ended as soon as it began. And then he ended up remarrying a second time and now has 2 stepsons and I believe an adopted daughter. Does that not sound interesting, though, that he had 2 sons and a daughter now? Kind of almost like replicating or rebuilding the family he had. Very interesting kind of side note, potential thought. And yeah, that's really all I know about the case thus far. Is they're all in jail. They all either pled or were found guilty. It will be a very long time before any of them come out. And oh, as one last final little cherry on top, when asked by Dr. Phil, I believe it was Dr. Phil or Pierce Morgan, whichever one, but when asked about Charlie, if Erin still loved Charlie, she replied that she didn't think she loved him. She didn't think she was ever in love with him, that it was likely she was just young and thought she was in love. But no, there's no feelings there. And if you ask Charlie if he loves Erin, she is his one and only true love, his soulmate. He will forever be in love with her. Wonder if he still feels that today. I don't know. Be interesting to find out. Maybe I'll look into it. Well, that, my friends, is the end of my story and the tragic fate of the Caffey family. Thank you so much for indulging me and keeping me company and listening to my tale as I worked on my WIP. I will see you next week for another episode of Tales from the Cr'wip't. Bye.